everyone, so my name is Carolyn and this is my first YouTube video. I've been wanting to make a YouTube channel about all the books, the TV shows and the movies I consumed, and I just wanted a place to vent out my feelings. So I thought a YouTube channel would be the best way. So I wanted to start off with a review of a movie that I actually just recently watched for the first time, and that is called Pan's Labyrinth. Now, this movie was made in 2006, but I've only just had the chance to watch it for the first time, and I'm kind of kicking myself in the head for not watching it sooner, because this movie is absolutely amazing. Actually, after watching it, I immediately put it up on my top 10 favorite movies of all time. It is that great. It's probably even my top 5 movies of all time. It was absolutely everything I was looking for at the time. It's absolutely brilliant. So what is this movie about? It starts off with an animation, and in this animation it follows a young girl who is the princess of the underworld. Now, she actually goes up into the human world, but she kind of something happens to her and she disappears, but the king of the underworld says she'll be back. Now, flash forward to 1944 Spain. A young girl named Ophelia is actually traveling with her mother Carmen, who is pregnant, to a kind of like a remote outpost to meet her stepfather, Captain Vidal. Now, Captain Vidal is the leader of this fascist outpost, and his mission is to kind of squash out the rebels that are hiding out in the forest. And he is the most brutal, sadistic characters I've ever come across in a movie. He's just the kind of character that you love to hate. He just has this his hair is all gelled back, and he has this brutal face. And so Ophelia is immediately wary of her stepfather, as is understandable. She kind of looks for other ways to kind of entertain herself, and she finds that she has this connection with the fantasy world from the very beginning of the movie. And when she goes into this fantasy world, she meets a faun, and this faun believes that she is the long-lost princess of the underworld. And he sets her 3 tasks to do, and if she finishes these 3 tasks, she gets to return back to her kingdom. And that's where all the movie starts. I love this movie. It is so brutal, it is so grotesque, but it's so brilliantly crafted. Let's start with the crafting of the movie. So the movie seamlessly juxtaposes the real world, where Ophelia is kind of dealing with her stepfather and her mother, who gets even sicker and sicker with as time goes on, this is so brilliantly juxtaposed with the fantasy world, where all the grotesque fauns and frogs and the very weird pale man lives. And the fantasy creatures are drawn and crafted, and in a way that feels very real. They have very real hair. Their scales and the texture of their skin is something that you might find in an animal in the real world. But at the same time, it's not. It's still very fantastical. But it still seamlessly transitions into the real world, because for example, when Ophelia climbs down the steps near the outpost that she's in, she sees a rock and this faun come out, and it's so seamlessly placed into the real world that it feels as if the fauna was really existing in that real world. And so the movie so expertly crafts the real into the fantastical and the fantastical into the real. And it really ties into this theme of Ophelia and kind of like the loss of her innocence. She prefers this throughout the movie. We know that she kind of prefers this fantasy world, and she thinks that it's kind of like the solution to all her problems, really. Which is very interesting to me, because the fantasy world that she lives in has all these like creepy creatures in it, and yet she prefers that to the real world, where with her stepfather and things like that. So I thought that was very interesting. I completely love all the characters in this movie. They're so sympathetically drawn out, and even the side characters are given all their story arcs. My favorite character was Mercedes, who is Vidal's housekeeper, and she has an epic storyline that I really liked. And we also follow Vidal's physician as well, who is also a great side character as well. But the star of the show is obviously Ophelia. And Ophelia at the beginning of the movie is quite innocent, quite naive, and she's kind of like thrust into this brutality without really understanding who she is, without really understanding how the world works, which is an interesting position to be in, and definitely a fascinating character study. And then you see like throughout the movie that she sort of becomes more into her own, and there are people or creatures trying to vie and manipulate her attention, and she really comes to figure out who she is and what she stands for. And the theme of the loss of childhood, loss of innocence, is very prominent throughout this entire movie. The adults in Ophelia's life are always telling her to quit reading about fairy tales. They tell her to grow up, but she never quite understands that in a way. It's almost as if the fantasy world is her way of coping and understanding her realities. And as the real world sort of the timeline of the real world sort of progresses, and the rebels are coming, and her mother gets sicker and sicker and sicker, she is drawn more and more and more to the fantasy world and trying to figure out what is happening. And so I really, really liked that theme in this movie. I really liked how all the storylines kind of coalesce together, and they really all come together so brilliantly. This movie is definitely super, super violent, and I have to be honest, I kind of skipped through some of those torture scenes because I just couldn't handle them. But the violence never felt gratuitous to this movie. It just felt like it belonged there. It belonged with all the deep, dark realities of the movie and of this world, and so it felt like it really fit there. So overall, I really, really enjoyed this movie. I would definitely rewatch it. The Pale Man still is in my head. The Pale Man is so creepy. But the storytelling, the characters, the music, the score, the acting were all so seamlessly integrated and so well done. I really appreciated that about this movie. So that was my review of Pan's Labyrinth. Let me know down in the comments if you have watched this movie and what you thought about it. And if there are any movies that you can recommend that are kind of like this, let me know, because I would really love to watch it. I have seen Del Toro's The Shape of Water before I watched this movie, but I think that was the only movie I've ever watched of him. I think. Was he the one that did Pacific Rim? I'm not sure, but definitely Shape of Water. But I didn't like Shape of Water as much as I did Pan's Labyrinth. It was just Pan's Labyrinth was a lot more cohesive for me. So there's that. So that was my review, and I'll talk to you in my next video.